Hey there, Trailblazers. Niiamah Ashong here, leader of the Trailblazer Oasis. Today, we get to have an experience that is actually I've just been really looking forward to. On our podcast, we spend our time with people who have created a lot of external results and success in the world. We see their external results, their outer journey, and then we take some time to slow down and understand who they had to become in order to create those results. Well, today I feel really excited because we have someone who's done that part of the journey for herself and has actually created it in her latest book. And we're going to get a chance to be able to spend time with her, not just on the inner journey around that she shared in the book, her actual path along that way, but we'll actually get a chance to continue to explore what else is happening now that as she continues along the way. So today, we have the opportunity to speak here and just be in conversation with Shelley Paxton, who is the Chief Soul Officer of her life and author of the book Soulbatical. Shelley, I am so thrilled to be able to just be in conversation with you here today. Wanted to give you just a chance to speak yourself into the room. Welcome to this conversation.
Oh, thank you. I'm so excited to be here with you and with fellow trailblazers. This is amazing. Like, your people are my people, and I'm really, really excited to dig deep and see where this goes. So I appreciate the invite.
Most certainly. And I think that that really is the case. I think that's why I'm so excited. My people are your people. I read your book, and I want to just give us a little bit of time for you to just speak a bit about the book itself. Trailblazers, here goes the thing. I'm going to invite you to just go out and read it all in there, because there's a lot that when we come into actually sharing your experience and sharing your journey, you just do so much justice to yourself. I think I want to start this off here, Shelley. Let's go off here. Let's get you to talk a little bit about the book, about what the book is, and what it means to be on a sabbatical and live a sabbatical life and be the chief soul officer of your life. Let's get some of that into the mix here. And then let's actually go on and play a little bit. So if the way I like to ask this here is, if people were going to look at you from the outside here, who would they see?
Oh man, from the outside. So let's put this in on a time horizon, right? So I left the corporate world 3.5 years ago. So if you had looked at me 3.5 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, you would see this woman who has it all, who absolutely from the outside looks like she has ticked every box of traditional success. Big titles and really sexy brands and world travel and you name it, right? The list goes on. And I even start out the book by saying, I've had such an abundance of good fortune and privilege, and I acknowledge that. And I am also really clear how from the outside, everything looked like I had everything. It looked like I had an absolutely amazing life. And even as I say in the book, it was the Instagram version of my life. It was the shiny, varnished, nobody really knew what was going on underneath the armor. And truth be told, I felt quite guilty about that too, because here I was, my last job in the corporate world was a really, really cool and sexy one. I was the chief marketing officer for Harley Davidson, right? Who doesn't love that job or want that job or would give their right arm for that job, right? Especially when you're in the marketing space and it's one of the most iconic brands in the world that people tattoo on their bodies. And yet, and I didn't know how to explain that even though I had gotten to this level and I was working for this incredible brand that stands for freedom and all these things that are my own personal values, something was completely out of alignment. And I wasn't feeling fulfilled. I felt like I was kind of slowly dying on the inside. And I felt a lot of shame around even feeling that way. So I guess that starts to transition from your actual question into what was really going on, right?
Yeah. Keep going. But before, I want to just kind of slow down, just in that space really quickly here, because there are a lot of us, the trailblazers, that have worked really hard to accomplish something, whatever it is that we that we felt would either give us the joy, the fulfillment, the happiness, or what we felt we needed to do because that was the path that we were on. And as I was reading your book, there was just so much in here of like your own discovery, but really getting to one of the pinnacles in your entire industry and still being at a place where while the success was there, if I'm getting this right, it's like the fulfillment wasn't fully in place.
Totally, totally. It was like, it took me a while to make sense of that. And frankly, I didn't, because what I did is what I was really good at doing. I was a warrior, and I would go into warrior versus worrier. I want to make sure that I'm saying that correctly, right? I would go into like badass warrior mode with all of my armor and like, I can push through this. I can get through this. You know, I'm lucky to have this job. My imposter syndrome would rage, right? There were so many things that were going on for me to, you know, just to not really sit back and say, what do I really want? Why am I even feeling this way? What's truly going on inside? What's that little voice in my soul saying to me? And instead, what I chose to do is armor up, busy up. Busyness was one of my diseases, right? I was just like, if I stay in motion, I'm not going to have to deal with this. I'm not going to have to sit down and listen to what that little voice in my soul that's, you know, feeling malnourished and neglected are trying to tell me, until they did, in a way that went from a whisper to a shout and shook me, you know, kind of out of the self-imposed stupor that I was in.
Yeah, thank you for being shaken and listening to that response there.
Yeah.
There's Shelley, it's been really wonderful just being able to um, go on the journey with you through what you've shared in the book here. You know, with Soulbatical being that corporate rebel's guide to finding your best life. I was listening to. I remember actually coming on a plane and to see you and a few of our other peers, and having you in my ear, and it actually changed the way that I approached that entire weekend. So I don't know if I've given this to you here, but I'd love to just spend like just 30 seconds just sharing my appreciation for you putting your story out into the world, and not even putting your story. I think that's the wrong word, for you sharing your story and continuing to do the work to make sure that myself and others hear it. It's had a profound effect on me. One of it is just getting to know you better and to be able to see myself through your story, to be able to see myself as I continue to grow along, and also it's giving me a better understanding of my people, of my trailblazers. Like there's just the actual journeys that we go on. It's
Mm.
also had the impact on me of really exploring what does it mean to own your story, to own your space in the world, and to speak your truth unapologetically. One of the things about this book is that you hide nothing, you hold nothing back. From the very like first sentence, we enter your world. And it is a wonderful gift because it has allowed me, as I go through my journey, to embrace more of my own gifts. It's allowed me to go through the process of saying, this is what's real for me. And I don't need to hide it because it can have value for someone else. And quite frankly, it's when I'm showing up in my highest value for myself and others. And there's this element here that I really do want to make sure I speak into this room here around the impact that has had for me. Just yesterday, I was talking to someone and I sent them your book as a gift because I'm like, it continues to resonate, and it's the conversations that we're having. It really is. A lot of my people ask me for a roadmap. I'm like, there isn't a roadmap when you get to this stage. When you choose to actually go on a self-actualization path and create for yourself out there and really choose fulfillment, there's no more paths to follow. But here goes a good book that can help you
Mm.
see some of the compass, like a bit of the compass, and how someone else has gone through their path. So I just wanted to share that really quickly. I felt like I needed to put that
Oh,
into this room.
thank you. It's so beautiful to receive all that. And you've shared some of it, but that was even more extensive. And hearing that reminds me of the reason I wrote this book. And it reminds me why I'm on this journey. So, and I'm hearing more and more from people who have read the book, are reading the book, are inspired and impacted by the book. And I did, I wrote it unapologetically because I figured, one, I can't say that authenticity is, well, so let's say this. Soulbatical is a way of being that's all about being more authentic, more courageous, and more on purpose, right? And I now say authenticity is the truest form of rebellion. And I know that's going to land with your trailblazers.
It lands with me. I'm
Yeah.
definitely feeling that there.
It landed with me when it came through me as well. And I thought, well, you know what? If I believe that and I'm writing that, then everything I'm putting into this story has to be raw and vulnerable and unvarnished and unapologetically me in the way that it's written, in the stories that I share, because I do realize, like, I was acting a part when I was kind of in warrior mode, when I was in the corporate world. I was known as a great leader, and I know people really looked up to me. What I have since learned, I've gotten notes from people who worked with me and for me at Harley. One woman in particular on my leadership team wrote me a note about 2 weeks ago. And she just said, I've got a much longer note that I'm in the process of writing, but I want you to know this much. I always loved working for you, but I always thought we were so different. And now I read your book and I realized how similar we were. And I wish you would have had the courage to share more of this side of Shelley Paxton when you were working with us. And that just was like, oh, like there were definitely a few tears shed. And I thought, she's right. And I hadn't done the work. I needed to go on this journey to do the work so that I could be in this place to say, I've made peace and I want people to see themselves in my story. And that's how I got really, really clear on, I should say really clear and found peace with this idea of laying my bare naked soul on these pages for the world to read. Because I thought, if I try to do this in a way that just reinforces the old image, like, oh, she's somebody who just has her shit together all the time, I'm not doing my own story any justice. I'm not serving myself or my message, and I'm certainly not serving other people. And my ultimate mission is to liberate 1 billion souls. I want to help other people, like spark a movement, right? I can't do that on my own. I want to spark a movement where there are more and more of us as embracing our roles as chief soul officer, right? And in order to do that, I needed to speak my truth. And I wanted to be a badass rebel who was being authentic to her core. And that's serving me well so far. I can see how it's provocative for people. It's really, you said it in your words too, like it's really challenging to you to say, like, what is my unapologetic truth that I want to speak? What does that look like in the world? And I don't want to make this sound easy because, as you've heard me say in other forums, last year was a tough year for me writing this book. It was like, imagine having a party and it's just you and all your demons, right?
Yeah. A part of me, I'm like, I'm imagining it right now. I'm like, doesn't sound fun, but it does seem like,
it's intense.
yeah.
And
Exactly.
it's not fun. It's not fun. And so I know you and I have a pact in just our relationship and our friendship in life, and also in what we're going to talk about in this podcast. Like, I'm an open book. I want to have these conversations because I think it's important to say writing a book is hard. It is hard work. Going through, especially if you're writing something that's memoir-esque, where you're bringing up, some probably pretty painful memories and hurtful times in your life, it is also the biggest healing gift I've ever been given in my entire life.
Yeah.
That journey, and I didn't know that, and I want to share that with anybody out there who's listening to or watching this and thinking, I'm scared to tell my story. Right, to take that step. I will also tell you, one of the rewards is, one, people will identify and connect with you immediately. They will see themselves in you. And two, you will heal. You will heal in places you didn't even know you still had wounds. And that's a big thing that's come out of this for me, is I've started 2020 unarmored and really, really at peace with being unarmored, in particular around my heart.
when you say this, like my heart right now is really resonating. I'm conscious of how I'm feeling as we're having this discussion here,
Mm.
and I'm grateful that you are at the place of peace. And I think that I want to talk about that, but I'm also imagining. I'm just thinking about myself and some like the space before the peace, right? You say that you're an open book, and a part of me is like, okay, is that what makes it so easy, quote unquote, to
Mm.
have been able to speak your truth in that way because you're just an open person. And I have a feeling that like even as an open book, I'll just speak for myself here. I found that I'm someone who's incredibly open, but I have a hard time being vulnerable. I can talk to you about anything. And even when I'm trying to be vulnerable, I intellectualize it in a way where it's like, well, it doesn't really impact me, but this is going to sound vulnerable for you. Right.
For sure.
So I
So
am really
same
curious
thing.
about that. I'm curious about that, like in the space before it made peace, like you were at peace with it. Right.
Yeah.
When
And
you were writing this here, how did you go through? What was some of the essentially what was the hardest part of writing this here for you?
a couple of things. And I will say, like, there was no part of this that was easy, not even easy in quotes. I know that you kind of did air quotes but there was no part of it that felt easy. The actual writing of it, the processing of the memories, the finding my voice on the written page. I would say a couple things. I'll start with one that is really profound and kind of funny at the same time. And I write about it a little bit in the book, but I realized that to really truly write this book and let it come through me, I had to surrender to my soul's process. And as somebody who spent 26 years in corporate America, right, deciding what a roadmap looks like and what are the way stations on the roadmap, and some of the things that your clients are asking you for too, it's like, well, what exactly does this look like? We were able to do that with a little bit more definition, right, in the corporate world, and I was used to having that or creating that. And so I had all of these corporate productivity goals for myself in writing this book, and I made myself crazy. I really did. So that was kind of my first major hurdle was in me trusting myself and trusting my soul that this was going to come out of me or through me in the way that it's meant to. And then I didn't even really know how this story was going to go. Of course, I know my own story, but how was it going to get knit together into something that looks like a blueprint for somebody that makes sense to another person so that they can reflect back and see their own story? I didn't have any idea, and that scared the hell out of me.
Yeah, this is like I'm with you on this here. As you're saying this, I'm like, well, how did this happen? Like, so you came in there, you had an approach that you were like, I know how to do this, and you applied your corporate approach to this endeavor, and you got to a place where you said that like, you learned you had to trust your soul's process. I don't
Mm.
know if it's possible, but if you can you remember like just either a story or a moment or a series of different events that helped you get to that point. And I say that just because like I like to spend time in the messiness, and I think like that's where we all find ourselves. We're like, I'm not at a place where I trust myself yet. I want to get there. And I'm just really curious for you if there's a story around like a moment where you're just like, you know what, here, or you know what, I let go. So there may not be, but I just want to
Yeah.
just ask and see.
Well, there are many stories. I'll tell you the first one that comes to me because it's very vivid, and it was kind of the moment that frankly, I was coached. So I was in LA, and I was with some of our people from our coaching community. I was working specifically with Christopher Maher, who does True Body Intelligence and just does beautiful, beautiful work. And I had said to Christopher, I want to come out to LA. I want you to work on me in the morning to kind of just start to unblock me. And then I'm going to write for the rest of the day, staring at the ocean. And I had this very like romantic kind of idyllic view of, what people think about. It's like, I'm going to write in the cabin, and just, it's going to come effortlessly through my fingers. And it wasn't that way. And so I ended up going to LA for, I want to say I was there for 2 weeks. I had rented an Airbnb. It was a significant investment. I was working with Christopher, and it just wasn't coming out of me. And I had set these corporate productivity goals of like number of words per day, you know, number of chapters by X date. You know, I had set up times with my book coach so that I had, you know, the accountability piece all baked in, all very corporate, right? And so here I am having a complete meltdown in Los Angeles because I'm not meeting these goals. It's not coming through me. And what I'm realizing is I'm actually standing in my own way because I'm not surrendering. I'm not listening to what my soul's telling me. So Christopher, I'll never forget, he said one morning, because I was crying. I was like in a puddle on his floor in the fetal position, crying, bawling my eyes out. And I'm like, I can't write. I'm never going to be able to write a book. Like I can't even write 500 words a day. It went on and on and on. And I was a mess. And he just looked at me and he said, what is your soul asking for? And I was like, I don't know. All I want to do is go walk on the beach. And he's like, Shelley, go walk on the beach. And then the next day I was like, it's not coming. I want to have like lunch with an old friend of mine who lives here. Like I want to connect deeply with somebody. Go have that lunch. And it went on and on like that for almost 2 weeks. And it was through that process that I learned to trust myself a little bit every single day. It definitely didn't happen all at once. It isn't a light switch. I know, I can just see from the look on your face, like, you know this, right? It's not a light switch, and we have to keep leaning into it. And it wasn't actually until after that entire trip, and I, in my mind, was like, I wasted this trip, right? I put that in air quotes because that was my mentality at the time. And what I didn't realize is my soul was asking for all that time in this beautiful place, working with this amazing human, to percolate. And when I got back to Chicago, it started pouring out of me. And I started to trust that, oh, there is something in surrender. And there is something in listening to one's soul. And maybe it isn't misguided. And there were many, many, many more stories like that until I really found my voice and my rhythm. And it was all a result of surrender and trust.
I really appreciate you taking us to that moment there. Like, honestly, as you were saying this is one of the things that has been running through my head as we've been talking is you're the way that you wrote unapologetically in the book is how you also show up in life right now. Like, and I've only known you since you've gone on the sabbatical journey, since you've decided to be the chief soul officer of your life. So like for me, I experience you in that integrity. And I think that there's a part of me that is like, that's really, really interested in that, in the space in between. Like this, like, because right now it feels like you're unleashed, you're doing wonderful things, you're getting this book out into the world, you're creating community around it, and you're changing people's lives through your story and through what it means for them to go on their own sabbatical journey. And I really feel you in this moment when you talk about Christopher is one of the people that helped me unlock my name from going from Nemo to Niiamah.
Yes.
Yeah. And that happened in the span of like a 15-minute conversation. 2 weeks with them, I can see, like, I can imagine where like the expectations are there, all these different things around, like, this is how it's on going to get done. And to hear how you actually allowed it to unfold in that moment, really, it feels, it hits me deeply. I want to just thank you for sharing that there.
Yeah. And can I add another thing? It just
Please
popped
don't.
into my, just, I guess, that I'm present to as you were talking. So Christopher is a beautiful, like, wizard of a human being, right? But that's not even the important part of the story. The important part of the story is that I asked for help, and I was surrounded by people who I could, help, just say, this is what I'm experiencing. And I was able to finally let myself be vulnerable. So to the point you were making earlier about like selective vulnerability, I was exactly that person too. I could pretend like I was being vulnerable. I could selectively share stories that only went so deep. I could look like an open book, but only choose to be sharing 0.1% of the actual book.
Mm-hmm.
All of those things that you said. And this was a pivot point for me in really trusting, like surrendering, trusting my soul, and really, really understanding what it means to be vulnerable and say, I'm struggling. I'm really, really, I mean, for me to just cry on somebody's floor, whew, now I can imagine it because now I'm okay doing it. Right. And I genuinely mean that. Like now you've seen me cry in rooms. I cry in rooms. I'm okay with it. I've cried on podcasts. I've cried, like, I'm okay expressing. I'm more than okay. Like I feel so real expressing who I am and how I'm feeling in any given moment. And that was a pivot point for me in learning to trust that, vulnerability was okay. And it was going to ultimately help me get the support I needed and to get to the place that I needed to get to. It was just going to look different than I thought it would.
I'm really glad that you slowed that down. These are the insights that I feel are, it's the things that we don't get a chance to hear from people. We see it and we're like, okay, so you just get up, you hire a book coach. I when I also just acknowledge it, like I was hearing that too. I'm like, you got support. You didn't, like, you came through, you're like, I'm flying down to LA. You didn't, like, you made it happen so you can get the support that you needed.
Yeah.
I appreciate that you slowed down to that core nugget within it.
And I do think that's really important I imagine there are a lot of people in your audience, in your community, who are thinking about writing their story. They may be at the point where it's like, oh my God, that scares the living daylights out of me. And by the way, it scared the living daylights out of me too. The thing that kept me going is I saw how it was tied to my mission and my purpose. When I thought about waking up every day knowing that I had impacted one more beautiful soul at a time on a path toward liberating 1 billion souls, I knew a book had to be part of the plan. And then it ultimately came to me. And so, I would say to people, don't try to do this on your own. And definitely know that it's not going to feel comfortable. It's going to feel super uncomfortable until the day your book baby's printed. And then it's going to feel even more uncomfortable.
Yes.
And then it's like, OMG, this thing's in the world and there's no taking it back.
Let's talk about that there, because I think that's real too, right? So it's the process itself of, like, can you unapologetically get your story out, the story that you are here to tell, in the way that you're here to tell it, however your soul will take you through that process. And then there's this extra level of vulnerability that comes with the visibility, the fact that it's out in the world. I can imagine, like in your stories, there are other people that are involved. It's not a fictional thing. It's like, it's your memoir, right? Put in a way that we can all grow through it, right? Like, I, like, in my mind, this is actually something that I'm just really deeply curious about. Like, there are people in here, and you hold nothing back like you are doing right now. How were you able to go through a process of actually bringing them on board, or being with the vulnerability of sharing your story with other people, other characters? No, I want to say characters, but that takes it away from, like, how real
other
they're
humans.
real other humans, like people in your life in there. So if I didn't ask that question, I think I would have missed something here. So I did want to just ask.
Yeah, it's a good one. I love this conversation because I haven't been able to go this deep. I mean, a lot of it is more surface level conversation about the book in many of the interviews I've done. So thank you for making this, really deep and authentic, and I hope a rich experience for all of us. So to answer your question, so interesting. First, I unapologetically wrote the story I wanted to write and the story that ultimately came through me. I didn't edit myself along the way. And my editor was brilliant in being very collaborative. I mean, that's another piece of this. It's probably more technical than we want to go into in this conversation, but I'll just put it out there to say it was super helpful to have an editor who understood me, who understood my voice, and who understood the importance of authenticity and courage in my story. So I did that first. I didn't say, what's my ex-husband going to think? As you know, he plays a role in the book. And as you also know from reading the book, and anybody who picks it up will learn, this is not a spoiler alert, I went through a really messy divorce. Very messy. And I'm honest about it. And I'm also honest that it is only one person's perspective. And two people went through that divorce. And I am only representing my own perspective and point of view on what happened and how it made me feel, my perception of events. And I was not in, what are the right words? I had no intention of dragging my ex-husband through the mud. So I am honest about how I experienced our divorce. I'm also honest that he would probably write a very different story about it. He and I actually have no contact whatsoever. We got divorced. It was very ugly. We went our separate ways, and I don't know if he's alive. I don't know where he lives. I don't know anything. And so I had to make peace with that as one example of a human/character in my book. And I also made the decision to use his real name. Now, I don't use his family name. I don't use his surname at all. And I never changed mine, so people can't track it down that way. And I'm just really honest that, you can never write somebody else's story. I'm only the author of my own story. And I think that's a big thing for everybody to sit with, right? Like, you don't even try to author somebody else's story. You won't succeed. And don't try to, imagine what other people are going to think or what's the story going on in their head, because that's not a game that you're ever going to win. In fact, that's a game that's going to just drive you mad. What I did do with many of the other beautiful humans in the book is share how I had represented their stories with them. And some people actually got the full write-up. So as an example, this from reading the book, there are 3 stories toward the end of the book where I share other people's journey and experiences with soulbatical. Some happened well before I even invented the term soulbatical, and others happened as a result because I was coaching or inspiring or whatever it was. And I wanted other stories to be represented, to say, there are as many flavors and textures and shapes and sizes of soulbatical as there are humans on this planet. So now 4 stories, and go create your own. And 4 stories with wildly different circumstances. Some people had kids, some had big families, some had no families, some did it within the context of their executive role at a company, others left their jobs. It looked very different, and I loved that idea. And so I actually went back. I knew those people's stories because I was intimately involved in their lives. I went back and interviewed them, and I said, would you allow me to write your story? And then I'm going to play it back to you. And to a T, every one of them called me crying and said, that was so incredible. You even reminded me of how beautiful that was. You reminded me of how good we have it. You reminded me of, just all of this stuff. And it was beautiful. So I did that. Those were like the 2 ends of the spectrum. And then a lot in between where I called and talked to people, or I shot them an email and said, like, my financial guy is in the book, and he is known for talking a lot. And so I described him as the typically very verbose, whatever. And I sent him that line, and I said, I love you, and you also know this is true. Are you okay with it, or I'll change your name? I also gave everybody the option to have their name changed in the book. I wanted that to be their choice and not mine in how they were represented in my world.
I really appreciate this. There's what I'm hearing here is, hey, there are a lot of great tactics, and thank you for just sharing your actual process through this here. There's a word, like the word honest came up quite a bit, and I feel like and true. And there's this element here where, if I'm getting you, you're like, there's an honest story that is my story, my version of the story. I'm going to leave you with the space to have your own version of the story. That's also okay. And I'm just going to make sure that I'm being honest and true throughout this process. And what
with
struck
myself
with
and
your,
others.
and that's the thing that like that's what I was gonna say. Like what struck me was like you wrote the story first, you know, and like that element of like without editing yourself, unapologetic, like whatever needed to come out, you wrote that, and then you brought in other areas of it, but you gave yourself the chance to just tell your story as honest and as true as it was.
And how, I mean, you're thinking of the same lesson I'm thinking of. I can see it on your face, right? But it's like, how true is that in everyday life? We edit our story before it even has a chance to get out in the world. We preempt it by, our conditioning, or what we think other people are going to say about it, or how they're going to judge it, or blah blah blah, right? There's so much of this going on, and of course it still happens to me every single day. And I remind myself of writing the book. I mean, like I said in the beginning, like this book, not only was it a healing tool that I didn't expect, but man, the number of lessons, profound lessons that came out of just the writing process for me are ones that I still carry day to day. And not editing your own story is a really important one, especially because it keeps so many of us from getting into action around something because we edit it when it's still up here in our heads.
I appreciate you saying this because that's why that's part of what makes this conversation so amazing for me to have with you here, because it's like we're talking about the book, we're talking about your authoring process, but we're really talking about what does it mean to be the chief soul officer of your life. What does it mean to translate each of these different things into your life in various ways. Even the way you are in this conversation, to me, I'm like, this is how you are in the book. Like it is
Oh
all
yeah.
out there, and so there's that high level of integrity, and I think that the integrity goes beyond your character. It goes into you being an example through everything you do. Like, when I heard you say liberating a billion lives, I'm like, yep, this is happening, and it's because even when you're not in the book or through the book, you are living the sabbatical life. And I
Mm-hmm.
really just wanted to say, like you said, it's a way of being, and that level of integrity and bringing it into every single aspect of your life is apparent in what you do and continues to have impact through that way. So thank you for that, Shelley. Let me just
Thank
acknowledge you
you.
for that.
Well, you just reminded me one of the things, and I won't go into all of these, but I kind of drafted what I now call the commandments of being a chief soul officer. And you just reminded me of a couple of them. Like one is we choose courage over comfort. And we just talked about that, right? It's not a new idea, but it's one that is now a principle in terms of how I live my life and put myself out there, because I remind myself, you're not going to have the impact you want to have. You're not serving yourself or others or your message if you play it safe, right?
I mean, even this whole conversation, you're like, when I brought up how we might have this conversation, you're like, this is so different from everything else that I've been doing right now. It's a part that I would love to go and explore. And even that there, like we could have had another conversation. Actually, we wouldn't have had it. It wouldn't.
No.
It would like we wouldn't have had that conversation. but
No. Well,
but
then
like,
we'd both be like falling asleep on our desks because it'd
yeah,
be so boring. And it's not who we
it's
are,
not
and
who
it's
we
not
are.
who this community is.
Yeah. Yeah. So I really just want to acknowledge you for being there. And if you have if you have the commandments and they're readily available, like let me know. I'd love to like share it with the community, make sure that they can see
Yeah.
more of them as
Yeah.
well.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Awesome. So let's shift a bit here. We have a bit more time here. We've gotten a chance to go through your process up until this point. I'm really curious now that like the book's out in the world, you're on you have press releases, you're on podcasts, you're really l- allowing the
I'm in the
movement.
media, baby.
You're in the media, like yeah, no, you are, and you're not messing around. It isn't just like, oh, I have a book here and I'm just putting it out to the side and let's see what happens. Like you're doing the work of really letting the message be out in the world, right? So I want to use this as an opportunity for me to be able to support you in where you are now and what's coming up next. And I think
Oh,
that yeah,
yeah.
it feels like a really great place to be able to play with. How do you keep up
Mhm.
that momentum? Where's your trail? Where's your trailblazing now? Right.
Yeah.
And I'm going to ask you this question in this way for this conversation with where you see yourself heading. what is your soul asking for in this conversation?
Beautiful question. What is my soul asking for in this conversation? Yeah, I think my soul is asking for it's almost like I'm having a hard time putting it to words, but it's like a reminder, almost like a reminder that as this becomes maybe more of a mainstream message, because talking about burnout and unhappiness and all this, these are pandemics, especially here in the US, right? This is like real stuff that people are dealing with today, and they're like heavy issues and whatever. As that, I mean, that is mainstream. And as my message becomes more mainstream and maybe seems less trailblazing, how do I continue to blaze trails? How do I stay true? Maybe the what I'm hearing is how do I stay true to my rebel spirit in everything I do going forward, and not follow somebody else's path, because I think it would be very, very easy to say, oh, well, how have other people done this, right? What does a personality brand look like? What does this brand look like? And really what it is like, what does it look like to do this in the Shelley Paxton way, unapologetically, boldly, and blazing trails while you're doing it? And I think that's it. And I don't yet know what the answer to that is, but I'm willing to explore that.
All right, let's play it. Like, I hear you there. Like, as you're saying this here, I'm curious to see, like, what's the fear underneath that?
Ooh, well, there's definitely fear underneath that. So I know I'm onto something, right? I think the immediate fear, I know for sure there are multiple layers. Let's see what I can articulate. I know the immediate fear for me right now is I'm almost overwhelmed, because I have no idea. No, it's not overwhelmed. I just have no idea what that looks like. Right? I know what the traditional model, of like a coaching business and coaching and speaking and book writing, like, oh, that's the nice kind of triumvirate. And a lot of people do that. And I love all of those things. And yet, what is this, like, fanning the flames of soulbatical into the future is a big responsibility. And what does the Shelley Paxton brand look like in all of that? Because I'm the leader of this movement, but I want this movement to way outlive me. This, to me, is this notion that I talk about in the book of living your legacy. Yes, I will leave a legacy, but I want to live my legacy, and I want it to live well beyond me. And so I think there's some fear in, like, okay, I got this far, like, help me. I don't know what the next step is. Like, I'm sort of searching for the intuition. I'm like, where do I go from here? And I honestly, Niiamah, I think part of it is, why do I feel so compelled to have to go somewhere from here right now? Maybe my role is to be in this for a while. Right? There's a lot more. I mean, I don't know how many people I've touched yet with this book. Let's call it maybe, a few thousand. I genuinely don't know, but I think it's starting to spread like wildfire. And maybe, my role is to be in that and fan those flames. And the being, we've talked a lot about the being versus the doing, right? It's easier to be in the doing than it is to be in the being. And I think there's some fear there too.
Yeah. As you're saying this here, let me just check in with you right now. Like, you've kind of given yourself an answer to this here. How does that resonate? How does that resonate with you? And what I need to do is just check and make sure that, is it actually true? So let me just ask you that question. Does that feel true and honest to you right now?
Yeah, it does feel true and honest to me right now. I don't know if that's everything. I feel like there are probably a couple layers deeper that I'm not yet accessing, but everything I said so far is true and honest, feels very true and honest.
So this is the place where, like, my general thing here is like I'm like I have one commitment to today that's serving you incredibly powerfully because like you're out there really changing the lives of others. So the thing that is, you said it yourself, you said like live in your legacy, right? And
Mm.
so I'm hearing this thing around like what is it going to be, how's it going to be out in the future and all that, and it almost feels like everything you've been saying up until this point has been how do you do it in that moment, right? So there's a part of me that hears this question, and I'm curious as to why it's like if your own approach is living your legacy and to being in that moment with it, why is this question coming up for you?
Yeah, it's a good one. I feel like I'm encountering another lesson of the power of surrender.
Mhm.
And I wonder if it's coming up because I keep ending up circling back to I can't design this thing. I can't control this thing. It's going to take on a life of its own. It's, I was calling it my book baby. It's now, grown and it's flown the nest,
How do you feel
left
about
the
that? How do
nest.
you feel about like now, like up until now, you've been able to share your story as you've wanted to. You've been able to like be unapologetic about your own mission and your own experience, right? And now it's out in the world, and your book baby is going off and it's doing its own thing. How do you
Mm-hmm.
feel about that? Let me just check in with you on that.
Yeah, I think I have mixed emotion. I mean, I'm really glad. Like I think it probably, I'm not a parent, but I imagine I feel exactly like a parent does when they're super proud of their child who just went off to university. And it's like, oh my God, I raised a kid that's like can stand on their own 2 feet and has a good head on their shoulders, and I know they're gonna thrive in the world. And yet there's a little bit of a void there, and I'm a little nervous for them, and I know that I can't be there to protect them and all of that kind of stuff. And for me, for sure, that's a very vulnerable thing. I know I can't control my story in the world. I know that people are going to have their own interpretations and probably some judgments and all of that of this story, and that's okay, right? I'm just getting more and more okay with that every day. So yeah, there's probably a little bit of like, I'm still getting used to it. I think this is the next layer of what I'm coming to peace with.
Yeah, there's an element here of like again, I'm hearing the question, and it's a great question. Like, how do you continue to blaze the trail your
Mm.
way as it goes out? And there's a part of it that's like I'm going to ask the question again here, and I think this is it. When it comes to this question around continuing to blaze your own trail and to becoming more at peace with however your book continues to go out in the world, what is your soul asking for with it?
Mm. For me to be okay with whatever happens.
1 second, I'm going to ask that question again, and I'm just going to like because I can see you like thinking about it, and I'm like I feel like we're in here, so I'm just going to just like
Yeah.
if you had to just like be in your body wherever your soul happens to reside for you, right? However you feel in that there, and
Mm.
we might get to the place right now where it's not going to be possible in 10 minutes in this kind of setting. That's okay, and that might be a question that continues on out after this year. But I do want to make sure that it sounds good, it sounds right, and yet even with all the things that you're doing and the journey that you've been on, this is still the question that's showing up for you. So there's an element of this here where I'm like, there's something here that we haven't really shown a light on yet, and in
Mm.
shining that light, like I want to make sure that at least I'm committed to that with you. Are you good with that?
Yeah. And I appreciate you kind of keeping us here and digging a little deeper. Yeah, I think this is really like my soul like is just asking me to surrender in the same way that I did to write this book. I'm now surrendering to the next chapter of this process. That's what I feel.
So let me ask you this: how might surrendering look like for you at this time, in a way that's still in alignment with you?
Hmm. You know what comes to me is surrender looks simply like showing up as 100% unapologetic rebel me every single day, in every single conversation, in every single client session, in every single media interview, showing up as me, because that's where the magic happens. There's nothing for me to orchestrate or control, or even worry about, right? Because it's coming through me. And I think that's another reminder. That book ultimately came through me.
There's an element of this here. When I hear you ask about like trying to see that vision out there, I'm like, you're in a place of a creator along this way. Potentially part of why the vision isn't becoming clear is because there's so many different ways that this could go. There's
Yeah.
so many different ways, and we don't even know like the tools and technology that might support where this goes in the future. And like the idea is you're sparking a movement, right?
Yeah.
A movement has movement. If you're really looking for it, it really has movement in it. My question to you, is how do you want to facilitate the growth of that movement? What tools do you want to put in place for people as they're building? How do you want to be available for people as the movement continues to spark and there's different fires that are coming out around here? Here goes the thing. There's an element of this here that yes, it will go mainstream, but like at the same time, like as much as these are mainstream like topics, they're still mainstream for a group of early adopters.
Yeah.
The mainstream portion of this year will come in like 20, 30 years when they're like, of course, if you've not read like her seminal work, like if you haven't read that,
She's like off
yeah,
doing
yeah.
something else. Totally.
And that's it. And like,
Yeah.
and my thing is like, and I think about this for myself. I realize that I will always be trailblazing. There'll be a part of my business at some point that has corporate programs in it, that has online workshops, not even online workshops, online courses, where my book, for example, I'll author it, but I'm not going to be the writer. Like I really acknowledge you for writing your own book. Like, and I realized for me, I'm like, I'm always going to be on to the next thing and finding the people out there who are trailblazing, and whatever trailblazing happens to look like at that time, they're willing to be first, only, or different at that time. My business, my organization will create whatever is necessary to appeal to the mainstream and have them be able to digest it in its way,
Yeah.
so that they can continue to come along the journey. And when they're ready for me, they'll meet me at the level of trailblazer that I'm playing at right there.
Yeah. And I think this is, what just came up as you were saying that is something I've been sitting with for a while. And it's kind of where the book ended. And it's on this idea of, I could really trailblaze in business. I could go all the way full circle, not go back and accept a role in corporate America, but in my current role as a coach, as a speaker, as an author, as a trailblazer, help companies who are more progressive, who want to build sabbatical cultures in their organizations. And that lights me on fire.
Yeah.
That to me is another layer. And I've started having some of those conversations, but it hasn't been real work yet. In fact, it may be the second book. It may be work combined with writing that sort of defines what that looks like. I think just letting myself continue to sit with that, I feel like it's percolating. I really, really do. And that, talk about, first only different. There aren't very many companies who are really saying like, what does it look like to have radical self-care on the C-suite agenda? What does it look like to, have time off be a prerequisite for smart work and creativity and innovation instead of just a payoff for hard work, right? What does it look like to put these things in a way that really, really supports talent, retention and development and growth? I mean, it would completely change what corporate America looks like today. That's really exciting. That feels badass trailblazing to me. Yeah, I like that space. I was on fire about it. And then I think I kind of got pulled back into the book because I've been doing so much just promotion around the book, but I don't want to forget about, there's this whole corporate piece to this where I know I can have an impact. And I'm starting to get connected with people who are doing related work. So I feel like there's already a movement underway that is just begging to become bigger. And I'm a big voice in that.
As you're speaking here, like, yes, you are a big voice in it. Let's
Yeah.
also give that its space there. You're a big voice in it. And it, like, as you're speaking here, it becomes like, right now it is about the book and the message of the book, but your book's message is going to keep going out into the world. As you're talking, what I'm hearing here is like, as your movement continues to grow. And you said it. You said, I was actually just re-listening to it. It was like there's a whole area about sparking the movement, and the question for me is like, you've been in the sparking world. The movement has been sparked, right? How do you want to fan those flames? But then like also prepare yourself to actually just have the full on fire blaze. Like, now this is blaze in like the fire context of it all, right? And then the inferno that comes from having a movement as well. The
Mm,
message, you've done the work, and you're spreading the message. But what is really awesome about you is that you're living your legacy, and the legacy is the movement. The legacy is the
yeah.
message embodied. And from that place there, I feel like you're already even just fine. Like you're like, this is what lights me up. This is what feels like it fires me up here. From that place, in this moment, I feel continuing to stay in alignment. And my only question for you, as we leave here and wrap up this conversation, would just be like, what is one practice that you can put into place to help you just check in on your alignment in the moment? My general premise when it comes to changing the world and having any kind of movement is that we model the world that we want to see in the future today. And that's one of the reasons why I respect you so much, because of that level of integrity, where it's like, you're not just like purporting something that could be amazing. You are modeling it and you're living it here today. The fun part about doing a recorded conversation like this is that we have no idea where years from now this conversation is going to be. Like, it's like we can
I
think about it right now
know.
in terms of certain things and sort of certain downloads, but the effects of it is just continuing on there. My question would be like, in that moment, for where you are, how are you living your movement?
How am I? So, just to get back to the question, what is like a very practical way that I can
Yeah. So the question here,
stay aligned?
the question is not about like forcing yourself to stay aligned. It's about the awareness of when you are stepping out of alignment, right? So
Mm,
you've set, what to do. I like, it came really quickly. Like, okay, I need to do this. And like, just got to be in that. Have to live the sabbatical way. The question for me would be, what do you have in place? What are some practices or some practical ways that you can just kind of give yourself a chance to be able to see, where am I? A barometer, a little radar to see, where am I at right now? Okay,
yeah.
hold on. Am I in alignment? And then continue.
Yeah, well, I think you're getting at it. I mean, one thing that I've been trying to do, but it's probably the first thing that I usually sort of lose, is slow down and create space and really intentionally build space. I need to hermit. Like, I go out into the world and I'm super in the world and I'm in, doing my thing, and then I need to come back. And I always need that space. I need that space to rejuvenate myself. I need that space to check in with myself. I need that space to just slow down and say, do I feel good about what's happening and what I'm doing and what I'm being asked to do? Um, so I think that's really important to me. And right now I feel like I might be losing a little bit of that. So it's a really good reminder to hold on and protect with my life the white space that keeps me in integrity, the white space that keeps me in creativity, the white space that keeps me focused on the things that really do light me on fire, right? And not getting, brought down into the stuff I don't want to be doing. And I sort of, we all can trip into that. So I think that's what it is. I think it's or at least those are two of the practices, right? Slowing down especially when I'm feeling in a space of overwhelm. And it's fairly easy right now with everything that's going on with the book. It can feel like it's just like, I don't necessarily have, like, it's not reined in. And I want to make sure that my calendar doesn't ever end up looking like it, it used to in the corporate world, where it's just like chock a block every single day, because I won't be serving anyone. And I certainly won't be fueling myself so that I have the energy to give and to put toward this mission.
So let's leave it at
Yeah,
that for
those are
now.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that, and our conversations will continue to go forth from here. It does, and I'll be curious how things continue to evolve. I'll see it out in the world. But as we go on here, I just wanted to see, I wanted to just acknowledge you for showing up in that level of integrity and for giving yourself, taking the time to really continue to live your legacy with us here in this moment here. Is there anything else you'd like to say, just to just as a closing comment here? I'd be happy to hear any way that we can stay in touch with you, and then we'll just end the conversation for today.
Yeah, well, I just want to thank you, and thank you for bringing me to that place. It was good. You even slowed me down in the moment. So that's, I always need that. And that felt great, and a good reminder. Yeah. And for anyone, if you're intrigued by this conversation, read the book. I mean, it's really meant to be, I wish I would have had this book when I left corporate America 3.5 years ago, but it doesn't have to be that you're in corporate America. It's, I put my arm around you and say, I got you. And I take you on this journey with me so that you can reflect on your own story and what it means to live your own best life in a non-cliche way, definitely in a trailblazing rebel way. So check out the book. It's available on Amazon and all the, and even in local independent bookstores, largely here in the US, but Amazon everywhere. And I'm most active on Instagram, on the socials. So it's at Soulbatical. And I'll spell Soulbatical because I know it's kind of a crazy, it's a made up word. I made it up. I talk about that at the beginning of the book, but it's SOULBBATICAL. And I'm sure that'll be in the show notes, but it's worth saying, two B's. And that's probably the best way. My website is soulbatical.com. If you're curious, you can go digging on there. I have all kinds of, articles, all different podcasts I've been on, lots of fun content if you feel like going down the rabbit hole. But and reach out to me. Like they're literally you can send me an email there. We can get in touch. I have a newsletter if you want to get a little soul fuel every month. Yeah, if you're intrigued, come into my world. Let's connect.
Trailblazers, I truly invite you to do this here, and to really take advantage, even if you just take advantage of one of these options. And when you do, send Shelly a message as to how you're like living, bringing Soulbatical into your world as well. I think like just continuing that dialogue and being in that there would be an absolutely fantastic thing here. So Shelly, I'm really, really, I'm glad that we had this conversation. I'm really looking forward to what continues to happen as your movement continues to grow. Thank you for being so unapologetic with sharing your message. Thank you for doing what it takes your way and continuing to blaze your trail as the message continues to live out in the world and the movement itself continues to grow as well. I see you as a trailblazer. I really respect you, and I'm really glad that we had this conversation.
Oh, thank you. Me too.
Take care. Hey, Niiamah here. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't yet, and then go ahead and leave one of your insights from today's video in the comments below. If you're looking to take this deeper, you can go and watch another video, or you can go to niiamah.com/tribe to get exclusive invitation to our tribe member only events. I'll see you soon.